Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming along. I'd just first like to say welcome to country. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the people of the Kulin Nations, the traditional custodians of the lands of Nam and the surrounding areas. I pay my respects to their elders past and present. We're here to talk about some lovely flowers. And when you have a flower, you've got pollinators. So we're going to try and set out to discover a pollinator for a little an orchid that lives in my area. So I live in Busselton, Western Australia, right down the bottom southwest corner of WA. And there are 117 native terrestrial orchids in my local, so you could say 50-kilometre area. And these are some of them that I've photographed in around my area. And so then you have pollinators, wasps, bull ants, and you can see a thinid wasp there. And you'll see on its back, the yellow packets on the back are pollinator sacs. So orchids, well, at least in my area, generally don't have fluffy, powdery pollen. They've got pollinator sacs, and they're sticky sacs that the insect goes in, and they just stick on the back, and it flies off to the next one and propagates. So, and here's a thinid wasp, just to show you the size of it. So it's about 20 millimetres long, and that was on my finger. Just I'm doing something, and all of a sudden this thinid wasp lands. You go, whoa, okay. They don't sting, native wasp from Australia. But so quite a few years ago now, I was going on a walk and with a professor, Professor Mark Brunderet, from one of the unis in WA there, and we were chatting about pollinators and why they were important, etc. And he said, well, coincidentally, no one knows, he said, for example, no one knows what pollinates the helmet orchid. I thought, okay, the helmet orchid's not rare. It's in the west, also up the east coast. So, you know, how hard can it be to try and find the pollinator of the helmet orchid? So coincidentally, 10 years earlier than that, a lady, Jenny, was showing me around, and this is a typical example of the habitat. And so this log here has about 3 species of orchids on there, and so you can see the green leaf, and it's a beautiful log, and it's quite stunning when you see it, all the flowers on it and what have you. And so I thought, okay, she's showing me this, so let's go and try and find this log, and I can just base everything from that. So I set out. This is, remember, 10 years had gone past, and she'd just taken me on this. And so I spent a couple of years, actually, just every now and then, feel in the mood, go for a walk. And this is just 2 of my walks, tracking where I was going, so I could see it's in a specific habitat. So there's some areas that I'd missed, but I'd covered in other years. So yes, but I did not find that log because it was a long way away from where I was looking. So this is one block. There's a track coming down through the middle. But yeah, so vagaries of memory. But while I was looking for that log, I found another one. And this is even more spectacular. So this is a tree bough, and it is about yay far off the ground. I mean, how nice is that? Photography level, it's just like a bench sitting there. And you can see all the helmet orchids growing in there, all those red the red dots there as he walks off the stage, about yay big or so. And so it's very spectacular, and you can get up to 60 flowers all on there, and it's all one species, just one species, so very pretty. And you can see all the moss, so the flower grows mainly in the moss layer. Yep. So this is the target species, Corbus recurva. The leaf is about 20 millimetres across, and the flower is about 10 millimetres wide. The top of the flower is about 12 millimetres or so off the ground. So you can see a side profile there, and one that's full on. So on the, if I can get my mouse, yep. So if you look inside here, you can see the cavity going in through the throat. Whoop. Turn off. And you can see, so here we are looking outside on the profile. So the pollinator sac sits in here, and the anther, I think I'll talk about that later, is just a little bit further down. So it's like this inside the flower. So if that opening is 12 millimetres across, if that opening is 10 or so millimetres across, you can imagine that here is only a couple of millimetres across, if that. So whatever goes in is small. So that gives us an idea of what we're aiming for. And it grows in mid to July, August in a dark, wet forest. So you think, yeah, that's pretty easy, until you go to that dark, wet forest in the middle of winter, and you are covered in maybe 200 mosquitoes, etc. So, yep. So there's another species. This one is Corbus despectans, and it comes out maybe 2 weeks afterwards. So there's a bit of an overlap. You get maybe 2 or 3 weeks with the first one, and then 2 weeks for this other one. This one is smaller. So this is a side profile, but the opening is even smaller. So we're talking about something this big, the ground, and then it's poking up through the ground there. But this is quite a beautiful flower. So let's see what we can discover. So Mark came down, and we made up some traps, and this was our first go. We tried a couple of different traps. That left-hand one did not work at all, so that was a failure. But the right-hand one kind of worked a little bit. We'd placed it over the flower, and it was raised up about 4 inches or so above the flower. We caught some insects, but nothing with a pollinator sac on the back. So we're thinking about that, and then the next move, I think he came down another time, and in the meantime said, yep, I'd found this thing called Tanglefoot from New Zealand, and it's a paint-on really, really sticky glue, shall we say. Yeah, it's transparent, pretty neat stuff. So we cut up some, first off we cut up some, what are they, projection, yeah, the old projection plastic thing. We cut up some of those, and we liberally painted it with Tanglefoot on both sides, stuck them all out, and we're sort of finishing off the last couple of traps. You know, we'd put them in different areas, logbook noted where they all are, date, time, etc. All very good. And we're sort of walking back, and I'm going, how are we going to collect those? That's going to be pretty sticky. So we went off to lunch, and this is very haphazard, this project. And so we ended up just getting a roll of, Glad wrap, and just coating that, but not very good for photography. But anyway, we refined it later on, and yep. But here is some examples. from that first batch of plastic sheets. And so these are mainly, the insects on there are mainly fungus gnats, the large ones there. So they look like mosquitoes, but they're a little bit smaller. So just to give some size context on there. Yep. But later on, we refined that, and I've got fortunate enough to have a laser cutter. So standardised sized, nice, some grid references, so you can count, number of insects per area, etc., and date, time on the, or date at least on the site, and the site name. But then, how do you store those? So you got those out in the field. So quick thinking, and in with 3D printer, and designing up a box, 3D printing it, and later that night had a nice little storage case for it, and they all just slot in there. It was beautiful. So I now have many boxes of these over the years. Yep. And we've had some results. So you can see there's 3 fungus gnats there, all with different shaped pollinator sacs on their backs. Fantastic, we're on a win. But then you think, hang on, where did they come from? And was it even a plant in my area? I'm putting it over the plant, roughly, or patch of there, but maybe they came from over there, or maybe 1 kilometre away. So at the time, DNA was still quite expensive. I think it was about $2,000 a pop. We did talk about that, but this is citizen science, and this citizen doesn't have really, or my wife wouldn't think $2,000 would be a pretty good investment. But anyway, we've still got all of this, so over time, I think prices will come down. So we might be able to do that. So I then went around and tried collecting some samples. So going around to each different flower and then trying to photograph them. And I've got an array of toothpicks. They're just all toothpicks to give us a size, dimension. It's pretty small, not very big. But better than pollen, the pollen, I suppose, that just floats around. Right, so time to go high tech. So I was pondering this. I think another year had gone past, and over that course of that year, I thought, come on, Raspberry Pis must be able to do something. So I think I was in a Raspberry Pi phase. So set out with a infrared Raspberry Pi camera down the bottom, I think. Yep, Raspberry Pi camera. DS18B20, it's just a small temperature sensor, very easy to use. 2 SLA batteries, sealed lead acid, so they're about yay big, very heavy, unfortunately. Power distribution board, so the reason for that is the current, how much current this rig uses. So I could swap out batteries, makes it very easy for that. But I've still got to lug them in to the forest. Electronics board, yep. So I made up my own board, etc. Real-time clock, so I can do date typing of stamping of data, and infrared floodlight. So started off with normal resolution, but it was just taking too long to take a photograph, relatively speaking. And so I found by shrinking photographs down to 1920 by 1080, I could get a photograph every 0.8 of a second. So you can see where the 3.2 million photographs might be coming in. And I was taking 87 to 100,000 photos a day at that resolution. And roughly a 30-day season, and 5 different flowers monitored per season. So building equipment, testing it out on a breadboard, lots of fun. And then on the left-hand side there, you can see the Vero board. Moved everything onto a Vero board with copious notes. Love making notes. And that's how the rig looked, just looking down on top of it. I was just using an off-the-shelf real-time camera board, real-time clock at that stage, and various leads coming out, not very waterproof at that stage. Later on, I had learnt a bit more about making my own printed circuit boards, so I thought, right, this is fine. I think one of the versions had failed, changing batteries once a day in the middle of winter and in the dark because you're working, and by the time you've driven there and walked into the forest, it's now dark and it's raining, and so you're trying to shield everything with your poncho and changing batteries. Water got in and eventually corroded the contacts of everything. So making up a board was a real win. And you can use it for other projects as well. Did some 3D printing for it all. Sunshades, camera sunshades, flexible battery terminals, etc. A lot of fun. And also, so how do you waterproof a Raspberry Pi camera housing? So did it first in MDF to make sure it all fit, and I think a couple of revisions. That was interesting, and then into acrylic. And you'll see a hole there in the centre, just to give a clear view through the housing. All glued together. Fantastic. Yep, waterproof. Now, hang on. That's got a real, I think it's infinite sort of, the focus is like 2 meters away, and the flower that I want is very tiny. That's not going to be very good. So how do I focus? Luckily, I'd cut a hole there, so I could make up a 3D print. This took a while, but getting it through into there and break the lens. The lens is glued into place, so you've got to sit there and snap it and then rotate without destroying the camera. But that all worked. Ended up with a distance of about 6.5 centimetres focus. So there's the final rig. We've now got waterproof glands, waterproof USB plugs, etc., HDMI and power output. That's what it looks like in the field. It's all pretty damp, so laid everything out. This is just for when I need to swap batteries, etc., and make notes, make some measurements and what have you. And that's the final rig in the forest there. So you can see at the base of one of those tree trunks, it's focused. You can just see a tiny little red dot there. That's the flower. And there might be maybe 10 different flowers around the tree stump there, or tree base. Camouflaged because people walk through the bush with their dog and what have you, and there's maybe $300-400 worth of equipment there. So, yep. So infrared works day and night, taking 0.8 of a second to take a photo. And initially I went to AliExpress and bought one of those infrared floodlights. Never played with infrared before, so I thought this should be fun. And lovely floodlight. Yes, this works great in my room. And put it out in the field, about that distance away, and it was just way too bright. This is floodlight for looking at the back of the room sort of thing. So I ended up with an extension cord, and it's way over in another tree. I thought, no, this is wrong. So quickly whipped up a printed circuit board at home and soldered on some infrared floodlight, infrared LEDs. Works a treat. But you can see here how close the camera is to the flower there. Yep, another shot. And that's what it looks like during taking photograph. Date, time, stamp each. Later on, I date, time, stamp each photograph and the frame number. Yep, about 100 gigabytes of data a day. So I've got to deal with that. And this is what it looks like during the day. You can see it's all a faded colour, and that's because of the infrared, and doesn't like colour all that much. But you can see an ant walking over the top of the flower there. So we're taking lots of photographs, and which is good. And then I need to use, so how, 100,000 photos a day. Okay, Paul, there's only so many hours in a day to look at all of these, and you've got to prep for tonight to take it out. So how am I going to deal with that? Well, OpenCV to the rescue. And I should have noted the guy's name, but there's an Adrian guy who was really big in OpenCV a number of years ago, and he's done some fantastic tutorials on OpenCV and got some lovely playbooks on how to do things, so mashing everything together. But there's some tricks. You've got to learn to ignore the wind, and the wind's fluttering some flowers. So I'd set up some cyan boxes just to say ignore that, OpenCV. And the magenta is the areas of interest. And so any movement of X number of pixels, like a pixel range, it's too big, might be a cockroach walking past or something, so ignore that. So it's just got to be the right size. And if so, then copy that photo into a subfolder. So in the end, I've only got to look at maybe 500 to 2,000 photos a day. And very easy just to flick through them. So this is the basic file process. So just carry over a USB stick every day. I've got to go there and retrieve the stick, put a new one in, copy to my home NFS NAS store, and then run a script which will, every photo it takes is all logged into a log file, so just use that log file to look at the date name of the photograph, and then annotate all that data onto the photograph. So I've got some good metadata right there, so visually. And it also creates a 800 by 600 pixel copy of that file. So OpenCV doesn't, well, it's just, it can be really slow if you're playing with large files. So it's just good, shrink it down, and and then turn all of those using FFmpeg, turn all of those into a movie. So I've got a nice movie at all, and then use OpenCV and motion detection to detect what's going on in that magenta box there. And if it files things, as I said, copy the photos into a separate directory and log all of the findings into a CSV file. So here's some results. A ant climbing out of a flower. It's interesting. One thing I've noticed is that there seems to be some sort of glands on either side of the base, inside the flower. Just here and here seems to be some sort of glands. The ants like to go there and just do something there. So we've got some further research to do on that. Some daytime, nighttime shots, flowers. This one's interesting. So OpenCV pulled something up, and you think, oh yeah, there it is. And then after a while look at that, a crane fly just perched there, and it sat there for hours upon hours. So that's maybe a fruit fly, and then over here maybe a predatory wasp. Very tiny. We're talking maybe a couple of millimetres maximum. And so now we're looking down inside, and a fruit fly is just about to go down inside. And so this is to show you the size of that. So this here is the camera, the sunshade, the weather shade on the camera lens. So the Raspberry Pi camera is this big, the housing's maybe this big, there's the housing, and it's just looking down at this tiny, tiny little flower. And you're looking down inside, and there's the fly. So results, over a couple of seasons, 2 bush flies for 7 to 36 seconds. 36 seconds seems like a long time inside. I don't know what they're doing down there, but 7 brown ants going in for 5 to 6 seconds each, and some fungus gnats for 13 to 20 seconds. And the thinking was at the time that it would be fungus gnats, so it was interesting to see so many ants going down inside there. But I've yet to still, it's been unfortunate with personal life, etc. I've missed a number of years, but we'll be back at it this year. But there's lots of interesting things. So when you set the camera up, you know, you're looking there, you're spending a bit of time there, and you see nothing. It's just barren, you think, oh, this is pretty boring. But as soon as you leave, within about 5 minutes, everything just comes to life. It is fascinating, the insects, the worms, the mites that are all crawling around. It's, yeah. So there we've got a spider in the top left. We've got a tick in the top right. I never had a tick on me. That's been interesting. Don't know what that thing is in the bottom right. And then a cockroach nymph or something crawling around. Lots of spiders, and you just see these big, it's like a horror movie or something, this big thing walking along, go, woo, when you look at the video. So I love collecting data. So, yep, let's see how the batteries are going, current usage. The red's the current on the right-hand side there. And you can see nighttime versus daytime, the current because using the infrared floodlights turning on, etc. I love using GNU Plot. I've used it for some other projects, and it is just so fast. You know, you're doing a million points of data, and it's just boom, done. So, yep. And also, you've got lots of rabbit warrens you can go down for projects, as per usual. And so I decided to build myself a little Raspberry Pi-based battery profiling rig, just dumping data, just dumping power into the big green resistors on the right-hand side, just to profile the batteries. They were just to see how they ran, whether they'd run the time, etc. I was pretty happy with it all. Yep, run times. Temperatures, logging all of that. I haven't really sat there yet my thinking was it'd be interesting trying to profile maybe insect movement, how active things were with temperature, and also the course of the season. So we're running July through August. So just, you know, over the course of temperature, do things wake up or do they go away? And while writing this, I was thinking, ooh, it'd be kind of, I never really logged rainfall. And so it'd be interesting logging insect movements around rainfall patterns and how damp things are there. So that's another improvement that will come up maybe this year. Yep. Oh, and I was happy that inside the box, where do we go? CPU temperature, CPU 48 degrees or something like that. I thought that's pretty cool. Inside a sealed container. Oh, one thing about that container. So here I was paranoid about water getting in, and that wasn't the issue. The issue was ants. They love a dry place, and I tell you, the number of hours I spent trying to make that damn thing ant-proof. It was waterproof, but there's a lid. You know, the lid sits on like that. So here's the base, and the lid sits over just trying to get that seal around there, all ant-proof. It was, you'd be patching. Visually it looks fine, but obviously not. Ants are getting in. So anyway, good laugh. So 2016, I couldn't afford, a bit of context, I couldn't afford a 128 gig flash drive, so I started off with 64 and gigabyte, and quickly found out that my data was, space was all being used up. So, oops. So that year didn't get much data, there's big gaps in my data. But luckily the following year I could afford the $120 or something like that for a 128 gigabyte flash drive. So, all good. Oh, and one of the other, we'll talk about it on this page. So some project issues was, so I've got a nice folder there and I'm just sticking files in, and it just kept topping out at 16,000. And I'm trying all these things, and you'd have to wait a day to see whether it would happen, or I didn't bother just dumping data in there, but at home. But eventually found, what was it? FAT32 is not your friend for this. So, good one. And then dealing, ants, 108 gigabytes up to 108 gigabytes of data per day. That was interesting, just the time length in transferring files back and forth, etc., running all the scripts. Some hours would go past. There was another one. Deleting 85 to 100,000 files in a directory. You just can't run rm space asterisk. It takes way too long. Well, it just comes up, I think it errors out. So I found the left-hand command there, works really well. Or just reformat the drive. Battery power's an issue, but now lithium batteries have come on the market, so a lot more. At an expense, though. So out of all of that, I got asked to go to Shenzhen and give a talk and a bit about the project, and have a display there. So I love maker fairs, and this is the only one I've been to, but the only place I've been to. I've been there many times, but it was really interesting seeing people's reactions to the setup there. And Shenzhen is also known as a place where people like to copy things, and it's all business, business, business. And so you're at a maker fair, which is meant to be friendly and open and what have you, and this guy's walking up with his big huge lens photographing everything like this, and I'm going, go for it, dude, no worries. You can take it. I'll give you the design if you want it. It's no big deal. And another guy pestering me said, that rig is fantastic. You could turn that into a toy, for a kid's toy or something. Infrared photography? What sort of things do you want to do with that? And that was going too far, I thought. But we had 50,000 people walk past over a 3-day period. Lots of fun. My wife was there in the back there, and I'll just divert a little bit here, but it was interesting. She had on her table, she's wondering, what am I going to do there? Am I going to sit 3 days waiting for you? So I said, no, bring something along. So she brought along some fabric squares about yay big. She's into fabric and quilting. And she brought along some quilter's pens and had people writing. So people could write, draw pictures, poems, whatever you like on those squares. And there we are. Oh, and she's doing LEDs in dresses and things like that. There's a hat there with LEDs going off. Lots of fun. 50,000 people, 3 days, you just horse at the end of the day. Or at the end of the 3 days. And so you can see some of the blocks there framed off, and met many, many people. And so we got 650 of those blocks. and I thought some of them are really interesting stories. So another rabbit hole to go down. I built as one does, I built my own home scanner for it, and lots of fun trying to get the angles. You can see the aluminium bars there. They're the lighting, and just trying to get that the right angle so it doesn't reflect back up to the Raspberry Pi camera on the top there. You can see a Raspberry Pi display at the end there, and that's just showing making sure everything's okay. But you close the lid and micro switch, the floodlights come on, takes a photograph and then goes off. And you know you can lift it up and put the next block there. So lots of fun. And then, of course, OpenCV to the rescue. It would extract the image, find the edges, and then auto-rotate. That was a nice little nifty feature. So we've got all that digitised, and one day we'd like to maybe put that online or something like that just to show people. It's some lovely stories, I think. 2 years of sewing to put it all together, and she's doing the Makey robot there. And it ended up to be 4 metres by 4.5 metres in size. So in 2019, we went back to the Maker Fair, and they put it up there. And so the Shenzhen Maker Fair is hosted, or the main sponsor, if you like, is the SEED, SEED, electronics making, small little hobbyist making company. And that's Ian on the right-hand side there, who's the CEO of the company. And yeah, lots of fun, and it was donated to the Shenzhen Maker Fair there. So I think they've hung it up in their boardroom or something. Yep. So that's my talk. All the project information's online. The Thingiverse files are up there, etc., and a bit more information about the orchids and fungus gnats, etc. Thank you very much. Is there any questions?
Yep, we got about 5 minutes. Any questions?
Thanks for the talk, Paul. Would it be possible to do some of the filtering in the Raspberry Pi as you capture the pictures, either directly or with another Raspberry Pi doing the work? 'Cause it looks like that one was a bit overloaded.
Yes. Back in the day, when I kicked this off, it was just the beginning of machine learning. Well, not the beginning, but at least in our, in the hobbyist world. There was no, I don't think there was any, now you can get little plug-in boards for neural, processing, etc. There's not really that, maybe on a second one, but it's a lot of data, and then you'd have to somehow share the data between the two. And I didn't know what to expect. So my understanding of machine learning at the time was you needed to have a data set of images to say what you wanted to see. And I didn't know what sort of insects or ants or what sort of things were going inside. So So I thought I'd play safe, just collect all the data. It ended up, so far it's 2.7 terabytes of data. So, people saying, oh, just send it off over the internet, and I'm going, right, I'm out in the forest, and reception is poor, and I don't have a 2.7 terabyte data plan. So,
The point was that you can just use the standard motion detection they use for security cameras.
Yep.
And get at least the first cut.
Yes, yeah, yep.
Thank you, Paul, for the wonderful talk. And favourite part of the story is how you were so spectacularly sniped by your friend at the professor at the beginning. I'd love to know what they think about all this, and people in their field. Is this the most incredible thing they've ever seen, and they want you to do every other type of species of orchid, or is this a regular thing that they do?
Thank you. It's the weirdest, I think. But there's people, photographers who will sit, there's a Victorian guy actually, and he's done a number of books. He has lots of patience, more patience than me sitting out in the forest and with mosquitoes buzzing around and ticks and what have you. He's done some lovely camera work. I was fortunate that this flower doesn't move, it just sits there. Whereas you get the other spider orchids and things like that and the moving around, so I think you'd have to clamp some of the others. I've had a go, but the photographs weren't all that crash hot. I think you'd have to clamp it somehow. One of the issues that I've got is the camera's very close to the flower. So I wonder whether that is influencing things. So, maybe. Well, now that Raspberry Pi Foundation have come out with some other cameras, and you can buy other third-party cameras that have zoom lens, etc. So it might be worth to try some of those, and they're not that expensive. Get further back.
I think you were in the audience for this talk yesterday from Dr. MacIver about giving students access to data.
About?
Giving students access to data sets to do.
Yes.
I mean, a wonderful talk yesterday as well.
Yes.
And can you imagine some sort of subset of this that you could slurp her way and imagine students finding other things? I was really interested in the things about the temperature
Yes, yeah. I've wondered about that, but I haven't talked to anyone. But it's where do you store 2.7 terabytes worth of files? That's the issue I've got. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to. It's open to anyone if they want to play with it. If you know of anyone, let me know. Yep.
Okay, thank you once again, Paul.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, and we do have a small gift.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you once again.